Thank you very much, everyone. It's really a privilege of having two doctor panels on our panel here for this webinar today. Dr. Sitesh, Dr. Roy, are you there? I think Dr.
I'm here, Rahul.
Okay, yes, I could see you. So I am taking a great privilege of introducing. In fact, these two doctors absolutely does not need any introduction, but I am taking a privilege of introducing by reading out their notations. Basically, Dr. Sitesh Roy, MBBS Mumbai, MCPS Mumbai, MD USA, FAAP, F 4 times AI, FACAAI, super specialist in allergy, asthma, and clinical immunology. Dr. Sitesh Roy is the founder of Dr. Roy Health Solution Multi-Speciality Clinic, Bandra, Mumbai, and he has also been a former medical director of the esteemed Dr. Nifadkar Asthma and Allergic Health Clinic in Dadar, Mumbai. Prior to returning his hometown Mumbai in 2011, Dr. Roy was a senior consultant at the Columbia Asthma and Allergic Clinic in Vancouver, Washington, in US, where he managed 3 busy clinics seeing both children and adults with variety of allergic and immunologic and stress-included disorder. Dr. Sitesh Roy also has been an associate professor of pediatrics and medicine at the University of MS Medical Center, Jackson, MS, and where he also served as a director of the Jackson Medical Mall Allergy Immunology Clinic from 2002 to 2010. Dr. Roy received his Bachelor's of Medicine MBBS degree at St. GS Medical College from the University of Bombay in 1996. He then completed a residency in pediatrics at the University of Illinois Hospital at Chicago in 2000. He went to complete the fellowship in allergy and immunology at the National Jewish Medical and Research Center of the University of Colorado School of Medicine in Denver, Colorado in 2002. National Jewish Medical and Research Center is a premier institute which has voted #1 respiratory hospital in the US by US News and World Report for 17 years in a row from 1997 to 2014. Dr. Roy has authored a number of articles and publications for leading medical journals as well as a book chapter titled Stress and Allergic Diseases for the 2-volume textbook. Psychoneuroimmunology, 4th edition, Academic Press 2006. In addition, Dr. Roy has given many lectures and presentations on asthma and allergic rhinosinusitis, indoor and outdoor air pollution, food allergies, hypersensitivity, drug allergies, eczema, primary and secondary immunodeficiency, allergen desensitization, chronic cough, stress, immune dysfunction, the rise in modern urban disease, and air quality and health impact, amongst others, both national and internationally. Dr. Roy has been a diplomat of American Board of Allergy and Immunology, a co-joint board accredited by the American Board of Pediatrics and American Board of International Medicine. He is a fellow of American Academy of Pediatrics and American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, Immunology, and an American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology as well. Dr. Roy was listed in Best Doctor in America in 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, and again in 2011, 2012, and as well as Guide to American Staff Physicians from 2005 to 2010. We are really blessed to have Dr. Roy with us on this panel. Thank you very much again taking out time. Now, my dear friend Shailendra Savaleshwarkar, I would like to introduce you as well to the audience. He is basically an Aurangabadi, and Shailendra Savaleshwarkar is a senior lecturer and program director of postgraduate coursework program at the Sydney Medical School, Faculty of Medicine and Health, University of Sydney. He also works as a physician in the field of infectious diseases with focus on HIV, STIs, and sexual health at one of the largest territorial career hospital in Sydney. Shailendra has demonstrated excellence in education and has shown exemplary commitment to supporting the professional development of colleagues and students both locally and globally. As a program director of course program, he provides a leadership role in curriculum design, coordination, and review of more than 15 coursework master programs. He also leads the postgraduate program in sexual and reproduction health, SRH, and has extensive established networks in the Asia Pacific region with universities, departments of health and non-governmental organizations. Shailendra is highly regarded, inspiring and passionate educator and a national and international leader in building capacity in HIV, STIs, SRH and infectious diseases. Shailendra has competitively applied for grants to support capacity building initiatives in education, research and service delivery. He has been instrumental in building a network of more than 150 mid-career professionals from 11 countries in South and Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, who are now leaders in SRH, HIV, and infectious diseases. His approach to workforce development through institutional capacity building enabled these leaders to implement changes in an effective and sustainable way. He recently received the Award of Excellence in Education for postgraduate coursework program at the Sydney Medical School, University of Sydney. Shailendra works with a network of basic scientists, public health practitioners, and clinicians in India and Australia for prevention and management of infectious diseases with focus on HIV and STIs. His current research is focused on molecular epidemiology of HIV, including HIV drug resistance, modeling COVID-19 vaccination using game theory and simulation, biosurveillance for zoonoses at the human-animal interference, and use of pathogen genomics for optimal treatment of MDR-TB. He also has a growing educational research program with a focus of global public health education and medical education. So these are the legends in between both of us. Not of taking much of your time, audience, I am handing over to the initiator of this webinar, Vaishali Bakshi, who has suggested this webinar for us. And because of her, we are all together on this platform, and she is the moderator of this webinar as well. So here you go. Over to you, Vaishali.
Thank you, thank you, Dr. Shailendra and Dr. Siddesh for your time. Because it is very important.
There is some disturbance in the voice.
Hello.
Now it's clear.
So, it's very important for a common man or a medical person to understand how to live.
Vaishali, your voice is breaking. No, your voice is breaking.
We can use Tejas.
You can use Tejas system. You can use Tejas system.
आवाज येतोय का?
तुझा
Perfect, Tejas.
Now.
Is it okay now?
Yeah.
Nani.
There are two systems which are on. That's the reason why it's.
Maybe.
This volume mute.
Is it okay now?
And you can speak from that your son's.
Tejas is much clearer, I think, Vaishali.
Yeah.
Much better to come to Tejas and. In the meantime, let me say something. Thank you, Rahul, for introducing us. One of the things which you probably didn't realize, me and Siddesh are actually classmates from medical school in KEM. And it's a pleasure to see some of our classmates on the screen as well. It's fantastic. And thank you, Siddesh, for joining.
Thanks, Dr. Shah. Appreciate this is a great endeavor. Glad to be a part of it.
Shall you unmute yourself?
Yeah. So I'm very sorry. Is it okay now?
Yes, it's perfect.
Yes,
So
loud
I'm
and
very
clear.
sorry. Okay, sorry, and again, thank you, Dr. Sitesh and Dr. Shailendra, because it is very important for common person and normal person and a non-medical person to understand how to live with COVID. So thank you very much, both of you, for your time. So let's begin with the questions that we got. Uh, First question, I would like to start with Dr. Sitesh. Is it true that getting infected with COVID-19 is all related to your immunity?
So, getting infected with any virus is related to your immunity, because immunity is your first line defense that keeps the bad things out of your body
Okay.
and keeps the good things inside your body. So the main function of our immune system is to differentiate self from non-self. So any bacteria or any virus that tries to enter our body is not our own tissue. And hence our immune system, both the initial responders and the ones that come a few days later, what is called the adaptive immunity, are critical for fighting off any virus. Hence, you have rightly said that anything that has to do with COVID-19, with its being able to infect almost 26 million people around, it's because these 26 million people and the remaining 7 billion people have never been exposed to this virus before and hence have no immunity to it. And hence the virus becomes a new offender that the body really has to learn how to fight and how to prevent. And hence the people who have a strong, healthy immune system and several other factors in place can be asymptomatic and have symptoms when they catch it. And the people who have a weak immunity or have other diseases can end up with a more serious or severe outcomes. Yes, COVID-19 is all about immunity.
Okay. Just right, you said that there are those who have immunity, good immunity. The people can be asymptomatic. So how to how to understand that if you're symptomatic, how you will understand that you are affected by COVID?
So that's the trickiest part of this virus, Vaishali, is that there is no way for a person who is asymptomatic, they are carrying the virus. And that is why the virus is spreading so much and spreading so wide and is so difficult to control. If you look at the previous viruses of the coronavirus family, what was called the SARS virus in 2002 and 3, and the Middle East respiratory virus in 2011-12. These viruses only spread from people who were quite sick with it, the people. Whereas SARS-CoV-2, the COVID-19 virus, can actually spread from people who don't even know they're sick and can give it to others, which could be youngsters, which could be children, which could be young adults, and they may spread it to several people and not even know they have any problems.
Yes, yes, yes. That is the big thing, because the carrier herself or himself doesn't know that he or she is a carrier. Yes, rightly said, doctor. So, Dr. Shailendra, I would like to ask you with this only, that when we don't know that the person himself or herself is a carrier, then the question comes about the herd immunity. So what is herd immunity and how important it is in the society?
Mute myself. Thank you, Sitesh, for briefly explaining the immunity part of it. That's important. And you stretch that concept that immunity, when a person gets infected, he potentially can develop an immune response against it and develop antibodies against that infection, whether viral infection or other infections. When you stretch that concept from one person to the whole of population, at a population level, if you develop that immunity, that is what herd immunity is. Now, I think it's really important. We are all talking about herd immunity. It is so important to understand that herd immunity up until now has always been discussed in terms of vaccination. So what happens is people get vaccinations and they develop the immune response against that particular disease that the vaccination has been given, such as measles, and you get the immunity against that virus and you do not get infected. Let me share you something in terms of showing you how herd immunity actually works. So I'm going to share my screen now that will explain to you a little bit more in detail about what happens in herd immunity. So I hope you all can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, so if you focus on the lower side of the screen where it shows all those images there with humans, this is a cartoon very nicely described in a recent paper about immunity and herd immunity specifically. If you look at the first group here, the B part, naive population, that means this is the population that has no infection at the moment, apart from the one person in the red. He is the person who has infection. So, असं आपण समजा की हा एक ग्रुप आहे आपल्या कॉलनी सारखा आणि ह्या एका माणसाला इन्फेक्शन झालं. एक माणूस आहे रो म्हणून डिस्क्राइब करतात आर नॉट. एक माणूस किती माणसांना इन्फेक्शन देऊ शकतो? हाऊ मेनी पीपल वन पर्सन कॅन पास द इन्फेक्शन टू? In COVID, it is roughly between 2 and 3 on a broad scale. It differs everywhere, but between 2 and 3. तर या एक्झाम्पल मध्ये जर बघितलं आपण की हा एक माणूस या 3 माणसांना इन्फेक्शन देतोय आणि ही चेन रिएक्शन सुरू होती. हा प्रत्येक माणूस 3 माणसांना इन्फेक्शन देतो आणि अशा प्रकारे त्या पूर्ण कॉलनीमध्ये एवढे इन्फेक्शन पसरतात समजा या ग्रुपमध्ये. And that's how basically the transmission of infection happens within a community. Now, what happens when you have herd immunity? Let us say, for example, 70% of the population is immune. And this is very important. I'm going to explain to you a little bit later what immune means. Immune just doesn't mean having some antibodies. But let us say that vaccination has been given to the population for a particular disease like measles. Then what happens that this person is trying to, obviously as usual, like the example above, infect 3 people. या 3 माणसांना तो infection spread करतो. But because some of these people actually are protected because of vaccination or prior infection recently. What happens is rather than getting 3 people infected, like in this picture, there's only 1 person who is infected. And then that chain is broken. And that is what we mean by showing the herd immunity. Now, it is so important to understand that the herd immunity concept works very well with vaccination. When you allow the same herd immunity to develop for a population without the vaccination, which is what we are talking about sometimes in COVID currently, yes. What that means actually is that 70% of the population has to develop the infection with COVID. Even if the fatality ratio is very low, for a population of India, that means significant number of people will be sick and significant number of people will actually die because of this infection. And that is why it is not an ethical approach to take to develop herd immunity without the vaccination that we have. And let me show you one more slide to make it a little bit more clear. Just give me 1 second. Yeah. What you can see here is an ability of herd immunity by vaccination and the impact that it can have. In this figure, we've used examples from smallpox, from polio, and from measles here. And you can see that smallpox was the first vaccine to be invented globally in 1796. It almost took more than 100 years for smallpox, or 70 years smallpox completely out in the population. This is an example from US. But obviously, when the time came in 19th, 20th century, we had more tools at our disposal. We could roll out vaccination faster. We could manufacture vaccine. So you look at polio in the US example, as soon as the vaccination was available, polio was under control in roughly about 10 to 20 years across the world. And now it's almost under control across the world, except for a few countries. Similar examples in measles. But what is important to understand here is that these examples of herd immunity have always been through vaccination. And what we are talking about COVID now is that people getting exposed through natural infection and not vaccination. So you take any questions if someone has, or we take the next question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very well explained, Dr. Shailendra, because even I was under impression that means very well said that herd immunity is better if we reach to that level through vaccine. Okay, thank you very much. I was under impression that more the people get infected, they will develop the antibodies and then it will be like herd to the level of herd immunity is what even I was thinking. So in that case, I think this seminar very useful. खूप सारे गैरसमझ Okay, Dr. Sitesh, I would like to ask you when we are talking about immunity. So many messages are flowing in WhatsApp and Google. बहुत खूप सारे research घराघरांमधून होता है कि what is useful for boosting your immunity. So can Ayush Kadha or Malegaon pattern Kadha or the medicines like Coronil be useful in boosting your immunity?
So, Vaishali, again, immunity, very broad chapter. And people have just woken up to it now in the last 6 or 7 months, when in reality, immunity is something you work on since you were a child. So immunity first requires a healthy diet. And in a healthy diet, having a well-balanced diet, and the diet in India has always been the smartest diet in the whole wide world, because we have seasonally varied diets, different vegetables, different fruits, different times of the year, different preparations done around our different festivals for a very specific reason. The commonest example being consuming tilsa ladu madhe til khana in the month of January has many health and immunity benefits, which people don't know. They take it just as a celebration, but it actually is good for your immune system when you're in the midst of winter. So diet is the first thing, and having a healthy, fresh diet, which does not include junk food, which does not include fast foods, which does not include soda and all the fancy teas and coffees, is the first way to build your immunity. The second build your immunity is through exercise. If you do exercise daily, you go for a jog, a run, you do yoga, you do pranayam, you do whatever else you want, and that's a fantastic thing for your immunity. The third thing is good sleep. So if you get at least 6 to 8 hours of sleep at night, so it's not that you stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning watching your web series because you don't have to go to work and school the next day, but you actually go to bed by 10:30, 11 and you sleep till around 6 in the morning, where you get good night's sleep at night, not during the day at 10 o'clock in the morning, but at night, and your immune system works very, very well for you then. The next point is hydration. People don't drink enough fluids these days. They don't have enough water these days. They tend to eat a lot of sodas and cold drinks and all those things, which is unhealthy liquids. You need to have healthy water, fresh water, okay? And now people have started having warm water. They've gone crazy and they're having hot water, which is not necessary, but having water at body temperature is ideally what you should be doing, rather than having chilled freezer water or refrigerator water. Those are all bad for your gut and your immune system. Okay? When you do all these things, and when you're following all these things, then you start talking about Ayush and Kadhas and Coronils, because these are supports an existing healthy immune system. There are many people who may never have a Kadha, they may never have any of these other substances, but they will still have a healthy immune system if they are doing some of the things that I told you, which is having a variety of diet, getting good exercise, getting good sleep, maintaining their immunity strong. But I do believe that the Ayush Kadha, I do believe that natural therapies that include neem, that include haldi, that include ginger, that include black pepper, these are substances that our rishi munis and our sages, त्यांनी हजारो वर्ष अगोदर आम्हाला सांगून गेले की यांचा वापर करा, याने तुमचा इम्युन सिस्टम स्ट्रॉंग राहणार. आणि तो सजेशन आज पण व्हॅलिड आहे आणि आज पण तो सजेशन ॲक्युरेट आहे, बट त्याला करायचं पद्धत लोकांना जाणकार करून शिकायला पाहिजे, not from the internet or Google. And that is where people are going busy, because I am seeing so many people in my practices who are ending up with skin problems, or they are ending up with digestive problems because they are having too much of hot water or too much of kadas, and they don't know the dosage, and they don't know when to take it in the day. They just think that हे चांगलं आहे तर ह्याचा जास्त घ्यायचा, आणि जेवढा जास्त घेणार तेवढा चांगलं होणार असं होत नाही. एक सिस्टम आहे, तुम्ही त्याला ओव्हर बूस्ट केलं, ओव्हर स्टिम्युलेट केलं तर तो नुकसान करतो. So you don't want to do that either. So I believe that natural therapies are invaluable. I also believe that homeopathy, people have spoken about arsenic, people have spoken about camphor. In the Unani systems, they have spoken about different therapies. There are many systems in ancient India which are invaluable for the immune system, but all on the basis of a healthy diet, lifestyle, exercise, and sleep.
Okay. So even it goes with homeopathy also, as you said, same thing. Like you have to know how to take it and all. So you mean that immunity has to be, it has to be in your lifestyle. It's not like only the last 3-4 months you started doing all these things. Okay, so just you mentioned that even exercise is a part that will help in boosting immunity. So do you think that outdoor activities in this crisis particularly help in boosting immunity? Because nowadays we as a parent, we are scared to send our kids down for anything, for exercise, even for the morning or for the evening. So how to compensate this loss of outdoor play when we talk the exercise in immunity?
So Vaishali, this is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have had all over the world since the beginning of lockdown, that coronavirus and COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 just flies in the air.
Yes,
okay?
yes.
It does not just fly in the air. Okay. So if you are walking outside in open air and you are maintaining a distance of 6 feet from other people, and you're wearing a mask, a reasonable 3-ply mask, okay, doesn't have to be N95, then you can 100% do outdoor activities. In fact, it is required that you should do outdoor activities, because getting sunlight is one of the biggest boosts to the immune system. Getting fresh air is the biggest boost to the immune system, and we sit in air-conditioned houses all the time, which is not at all good for our immunity. Yes. So first of all, everyone listening to this now, later in a recorded version, understand that COVID-19 spreads indoors in crowded areas or where people are sitting in close proximity. It doesn't fly in the air and infect people. Even if you look at what is called super spreaders, when one person is infected 40, 50, 60 people, it has happened inside a closed church or inside a closed bar or a club or a pub or some karaoke place. It has never occurred in open air. Open air transmission hasn't been described anywhere in the world. So I think taking reasonable precautions and doing outdoor exercise and activity is a must and is a must for all of us.
Okay, thank you, doctor. Because nowadays, when the guidelines have come, ki 5 लोकांबरोबर get togethers आणि छोटे gatherings होऊ शकतात. So people started doing the get together inside home, and probably that might be the reason why we are getting the numbers this. That's why I say that की खूप सारखे गैरसमज दूर होणार आहेत. Because people prefer to do get-togethers inside home rather than going out, because they are getting scared. And if we are as a parent also getting scared when my son want to go out, I said no, okay, because in our society also we got some cases, and I'm telling him no, it's okay, you don't go out. And not only me, many parents are that, and many have joined. So I think खूप गैरसमज दूर होता है. Thank you very much, Dr. Sitesh. Dr. Shailendra, I would like to ask, just stress this a bit, की ज्या लोकांना अँटीबॉडीज डेव्हलप झालेल्या आहेत is the person who developed antibodies is safe to spend time with?
तेचनी सगळ्यांना एक्सप्लेन केलं की आउटडोअर किती इम्पॉर्टंट आहे. मग प्रश्न येणारच हा की ज्याला अँटीबॉडी आहेत याचा काय अर्थ आहे. आता fundamentally, I think we need to understand the difference between an antibody and immunity against a particular infection. Antibody signifies that you have probably acquired the infection in the past. So that possibly is true within the limitation of the tests that we have. Now, the tests that we have are reasonably good tests, but they are not absolute. So just because somebody doesn't have antibody may not mean that they actually have never had the infection. What we know from number of studies now is that when you get COVID, you develop antibodies that we measure currently in India. For example, we have a lot of surveys, then the antibodies that we're measuring at the moment do wane, they reduce in their titers over time. And that means that in about weeks to months, they may not be an antibody in some people. For some people, the antibodies remain for, definitely up to 3 months at the moment that we have studies for. Whether that remains longer than that, we'll have to wait and see. Antibodies नाही आहेत म्हणून इन्फेक्शन झालं नव्हतं किंवा अँटीबॉडी आहेत म्हणून पुन्हा इन्फेक्शन होणार नाही यातले अजून आपण सांगड नाही घातलेली आहे. कारण एखाद्या माणसाला अँटीबॉडी आहेत याचा अर्थ त्याला काही महिन्यांपूर्वी इन्फेक्शन होऊन गेलं होतं. पण आता आपण सध्या या आठवड्यामध्येच आपण ऐकलं की मुंबईमध्ये एका डॉक्टरला रिइन्फेक्शन सांगितलं. हॅज फार लिमिटेड नंबर ऑफ लोकांना, फार व्हेरी स्मॉल नंबर ऑफ पीपल हॅव actually had the reinfection with COVID yet. Only time is going to tell us whether that's going to increase and whether that will become a big problem or not. Now, the challenge we have is mixing with people who have antibodies. Yes. Right? This is where the issue is. That what we don't know at the moment is that whether the person can be reinfected. Now, there is assumption, and Sitesh can probably contribute. If you get reinfected again, you may not get a severe disease second time you get reinfected with the same virus. And that is a possibility in this case based on studies from other viruses that we know of. So it's possible that the person may not actually get severe disease. Potentially the opposite can happen as well. We don't know that yet. But what we don't know is whether the person may not get infected at all and may not transmit to other people. Yes. So there are risks for that person itself that he may catch infected again from somebody who has got it now. Or if he gets reinfected, which is very small number of people, if any, that they may transmit the infection again, even if they had antibodies in the past. So that clarity isn't there yet. So at this stage, I think person with immunity or antibodies at this stage may not mean immunity. So when you get antibodies, there are different types of antibodies. The antibodies that are used to detect a virus, they are diagnosing antibodies. That is what we are doing currently with those antibodies that we test. Now, there are other antibodies which are protective or sterilizing or neutralizing antibodies, which are the ones that protect you. Now, it's very complex, the immunity, and Sitesh obviously is an expert on this area. But what happens in the antibody area is that you have antibodies, which is one way of protecting you, but there are cells that protect you as well. So even if your antibodies have disappeared over time, what we know potentially is that our T cells might be able to have a memory of these infections. And they may come into picture and protect us from getting a severe disease. Now, whether that protects us from getting infection and transmitting, we don't know that yet. So I don't know, Sitesh, do you want to say anything about this?
One thing I would like to add, I completely agree with you, Shailendra, but I think just speaking, because I have heard people ask me this question, and what Vaishali was asking was after someone had the infection, and they've developed the antibodies, because I've had people who come and said, "अरे त्याला कोरोना झाला होता, त्याच्या बरोबर काही संपर्क ठेवू नका, त्यांच्या बरोबर बोलू नका, त्यांच्याशी दूर राहा." So I think there is a stigma also on the other side that this person was COVID positive. Now their COVID positivity happened 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago, and their antibody test is positive, and people still avoiding contacting or coming in contact with them. That I believe that is not required, because once a person's fever is gone, once a person's cough and respiratory symptoms are gone, and once it has been about, in an average person, not for every single person, about 14 days since the infection began, the person generally no longer infectious to other people.
Okay.
And in that situation, a person can come in contact with them, they can eat with them, they can spend time with them with all the usual precautions, because like Shailendra said, a person who has had infection can get an infection again from someone who may not know they have it. And also the other important thing is that with this kind of antibody development, so far we have data for about 4 months. We know that antibodies are remaining in people's bodies after infection on an average for 4 months, because those are some of the longest studies. Whether these antibodies will decline, and after they decline, could the person still be protected because of their cellular immunity? These are questions that are unanswered. But I feel that people do not need to be scared or afraid of interacting with people who have had COVID and who have recovered from COVID, because majority of them are not going to be infectious after 14 or maximum 18 days.
Okay. So actually
Absolutely
that's,
agree.
yeah,
Wait,
that's
I think let
what
me
the,
just, sorry,
yes.
go.
हाँ नहीं तू बोलायचं असेल तर डॉक्टर.
So basically, absolutely, I think it's important that we treat people who have recovered from COVID as like us, because they are in the same boat as everybody else again. And so this stigma about COVID it absolutely needs to be wiped out. What I haven't seen yet is from community about making sure, and we did that with our HIV in the HIV era 20, 30 years ago. I think people who recovered from COVID, we talk about COVID, where we clap for them when they go out of the hospital. I've seen that on many television channels across the world, not just from India. But what we need to do is then make the extra effort of working with those people and making sure they don't feel left out. Even within their communities, friend circle, and within their families, that they are actually integrated back into the family and they take the same precautions as everybody else does.
Exactly.
काहीच फरक नाही पाहिजे, कारण परत एकदा असं म्हणाला की once you are recovered from COVID, and by the time the antibodies are there, most people would have recovered and are not infectious. They cannot transmit करू शकत नाहीत. They go in the same boat as everybody else is. So what everybody else does, they should do it. Same thing, physical distancing, mask, but sitting together with the family, it's exactly the same. They should go back to normal in a way within the family.
Yes, exactly. Because as you both said, ki jema, once a person is diagnosed with COVID positive, if we come to know, the people are treating like a terrorist. Like, okay, there we find a patient. Find patient means, so that because of that, many people are not ready to get the test done. So, Dr. Sitesh, my next question is, in which case should we do the COVID-19 test? Because people are nowadays people are getting scared to get the test done.
So I think there are many factors in this that play a role why people are scared. So for example, in Mumbai, when it first began, if someone went in for a test, then their family got quarantined, the whole building got sealed, or the entire area got sealed. There were some very, very drastic measures that were taken, which later on we realized through good epidemiological studies, these are not required. You just need to quarantine that family and test their contacts and do the contact tracing properly. So and also people were taken away from the house forcibly against their will. They were kept in a place separately. So I think all of this created a lot of fear in people's minds with even wanting to get diagnosed, because they were afraid that something bad would happen. When in reality, yes, the testing, the way it is done through the nasopharyngeal swab is a little uncomfortable, okay? But it's still not that uncomfortable that it can't be done even in a child. So it can be done even in a child. And I believe that if someone has symptoms, so I think the first reason to do testing, since that's your question, is if someone is having fever, okay, if someone is having sore throat irritation, okay, if someone is having nasal blockage, loss of sense of smell, loss of sense of taste, okay, this is present in around 30% people. If someone is having a dry cough, these symptoms, or sometimes even, okay, If someone is suddenly having unexplained nausea, stomach upset, abdominal pain, diarrhea, some people are presenting only with पोटाचे symptoms. त्यांना दुसरं काहीच नसतो, फक्त पोटाचे symptoms असतात. तर त्यांना पण थोडं केअर घ्यायला पाहिजे. त्याच्याबरोबर थोडा लो ग्रेड ताप आहे. So they have to be careful of those things also. Okay. When you put all these symptoms together, and if it progresses and someone starts having breathlessness, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing when they are trying to speak, they have any of these symptoms, fever, cough, cold, congestion, loss of smell, GI symptoms. Some people have even presented with only conjunctivitis, redness and watering and symptoms of the eyes. Okay. Some have presented only with skin rashes with fever. So COVID has shown us that it can present in many different ways, but the most common way of presenting is fever, sore throat, can come in either. So sore throat may come before the fever or it may come after the fever. Also body ache and muscle ache and fatigue are a very common symptom of COVID. So if someone out of the blue starts having a lot of body pain, fatigue, weakness, tiredness, काही करायची इच्छा नाही, अंग दुखतोय, जसं बोलतात ना पूर्ण अंग तुटतोय, जसं it says very very bad pain, tiredness, असल्या सिच्युएशन मध्ये पर्सनला स्वतः जाऊन फाइंड आउट करून where the testing is happening, they should get tested. And if they are living in a family and there are other members who may be having milder symptoms than them, they should also be tested. So it becomes really a personal responsibility for a person to go and get themselves checked. And once they get checked, they need to go into what is called self-quarantine. Test negative, so we have to remember that the RT-PCR has a sensitivity of 70%, not 100%, which means 30% people who have the infection may also get a negative test. So we pay more importance to the person's symptoms than necessarily to the test. So if the symptoms are indicative of COVID, and we have to understand it might as well be the flu, it may be normal flu, influenza, but the person still has to be in isolation for at least 10 to 14 days, or minimum people would say 7 days. In such a situation, so that even if it is flu that they are carrying, they don't transmit the flu to other people. So, and if they have the COVID, then they definitely won't transmit the COVID to other people. But I think that testing needs to be done for people who have symptoms. Testing needs to be done for immediate family contacts of people who have been diagnosed with COVID, and also maybe close co-workers that they have spent enough time with. They also might be people who want to get tested.
Okay.
Sitesh,
So just,
I would just like to add, Sitesh,
Yes.
because it's so important to actually increase the testing that we have currently, because that is the only way we can control this infection. From a public health point of view, it is so important that people who are in close contact with those diagnosed or symptomatic should get tested and probably self-quarantine. Let me show you something, because that might tell you why I'm saying this. And there are a variety of reasons, but let me share the screen and show you something which is very important, I think, for us to understand where we stand as a country at this stage, what it means for us. So if you have a look at this, this is the positivity rate in a way of how many tests. So if you do 100 tests, how many people are diagnosed? That means that tells you about how many more people need to be testing. So I'm in Australia, for example, our positivity rate is about 0.2%. So we are doing 500 tests for getting one infection. India, we have about 7.7%. US is about 6.2 and UK is about 0.6. We need to be doing much more testing to make sure that this rate, so more and more contacts are found and isolated and quarantined. This is the only way we can stop spread of this infection, rather than just diagnosing those who are infected. That's one way, but we need to get more and more people in this network of contacts, and that is critical for controlling this infection, because there is nothing else that we have at the moment. We don't have a vaccine yet. There is no way herd immunity is the way to protect the community. So this is the only way we are going to protect. And that's why we are stigmatized testing in a big time, that having a corona test should be seen as something that they are doing for the community rather than for just yourself. And that is so important for all of us to get as much access to testing, but also then volunteer yourself to get testing. स्वतःहून तुम्ही पुढे आलं पाहिजे की माझी टेस्ट करा. माझ्या घरामध्ये किंवा someone that I came in contact with त्याला कोविड झाला होता. आणि it shouldn't be something that you should stop yourself from doing and hide. Actually, it should be more encouraged. The more you do it, you're doing it not just for yourself, you're doing it for the whole of your colony, your community, your society. It should be seen as something that, the COVID warrior, we talk about doctors and healthcare providers. I think the real COVID warriors are all of us who will go out and get tested.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah. So Dr. Sitesh, just you mentioned that when you spend enough time with the person who tested positive. So what that enough time means how much time? Like suppose if I have a friend and I talk with my friend, and after 1 or 2 days I came to know that my friend got infected with COVID. So is it necessary for me also to get the test done? So that enough time. Yeah.
This is a very good question and a very technical question, Vaishali. I think you must have read something on this because most people don't ask me this question.
No. Not read. Actually,
or
there
you may
are
have,
there are cases in my society. Yes.
In my society who have had this question. Good.
Yes.
It's a very technical. It's a very technical question. I'm glad it. So when this was studied very carefully and in a scientific way, okay, so we as doctors, we spend time with our patients in our examination chamber, okay. So it was tried to be studied what amount of time if you spend with a person, your chances of contracting the virus from that person, त्यांच्याकडून तो virus तुम्हाला पकडण्याचे chances highest कधी असतात. It was around 15 minutes, okay, 15 minutes seems to be the interesting timeline that was found. So if you spent more than 15 minutes with a person, it was found that, and this is a very complex mathematical and statistical calculation by which this time was found, because you have to understand that, the virus goes as an aerosol and it is also airborne. And there are many other factors. Were you talking to your friend and your friend was standing 6 feet away from you, or was your friend sitting right next to you? Okay. Where it was like 1 foot away. Were you all both wearing masks or were you all not wearing masks? Okay. That makes a difference, because if you all were not wearing masks, even a 3-minute conversation may be dangerous. Okay.
Yes.
So if you're like, for us, if we are sitting in a doctor's cabin, we have a mask, our patient has a mask, even then, and there's an AC going on and the chamber is closed, okay, then it turns out that even 15 is a critical amount. So again, in this, where you are, how far you are from the person, are you all both wearing a mask, or at least is one person wearing a mask? All of these factors will decide your risk of catching the infection. And in that situation, there is no right or wrong answer. So if you find out that a friend of yours that you spend time with got diagnosed and you have the slightest of symptoms, you should get tested. Okay. Now, as Shailendra said, if you want to be someone who's proactive about protecting your society and your community, then you may even just go and get yourself tested like that, because you did come in contact with someone who was positive. But I think that there needs to be a reasonable balance. Okay, the truth is somewhere between the two extremes that I said. Like, because you came in contact, you get tested. It's not as simple as that. And because you spent exactly 15 minutes, then you must get tested. It's you have to realize this is not the virus is a live being. Your immunity is a live thing. How they interact, how they interface. They say that you need 1 million viral particles to get infected. Okay. And in 1 ml of saliva, 1 ml of saliva, billion viral particles. So you can imagine you need very little to get infected. But how that travels to you, how far you are from the person, are you in a closed space, are you talking to them and you met them on the street outside, many factors will come in deciding whether you need to get tested or not.
Okay.
Sitesh, I just want to even ask you, we are doing is that once you are in a healthcare situation, so if you're going to a hospital or a nursing home, for example, it is so important because we all have air conditioned systems in those nursing homes or hospitals. And I've seen time and again that patient and the consultant in their room are wearing masks, but nobody outside in the corridor is wearing a mask. Because they think, well, I'm not close to anybody there. I think with this aerosol and the circulation that we have, in the healthcare setting at least, and it's mandatory now for all of us in Sydney, that if you're in a hospital situation, if you're either a patient or a doctor or any other healthcare provider, that in public common areas that you wear a mask. Because if you're going to a healthcare setting, I think it's so critical to make sure that that is where you are protected, because we've seen a significant number of healthcare providers getting infected. And what we don't want is that this simple thing like a mask that can protect you, please do.
Yes, so what both of you want
And-
to say is that taking precautions is the main thing that everyone has to do.
And
And
Vaishali,
the
I
other
would
thing
like
is
to
that
add-
don't, yeah.
Yes.
One
Just-
thing I would like to add is that wear the mask properly.
Yeah.
Don't cover just your mouth and keep your nose open. Don't wear the mask on your chin. Don't wear the mask on your forehead. I've seen people do all kinds of weird things. The mask has to cover the nose and the mouth. It has to be worn properly. People are wearing masks, but they're wearing it in all kinds of weird places.
And not wearing all the time.
Well, that is suffocating actually, wearing mask all the time, but I think we have to do, doctors are doing it they are wearing mask for 12 hours, 20 hours. So even we also have to do at least when we are going out. So wearing mask is must, even if you are talking with anybody or coming contact with. So that is the main thing that you both wanted
Even
to
your
tell.
best friend,
Sorry?
even your best friend, if you
Yes,
trust,
yes.
will be wearing a mask.
Yes,
Hi,
yes.
Vaishali. Hi,
Hello.
Vaishali.
Yes.
Hello. There are a number of questions in the chat. Would you like to?
Yes, we'll come.
Yes,
we'll
yes,
come to the
sure.
questions,
Yeah,
Pragya.
yeah, we'll come to the questions.
We are noting the same. We are noting the same.
Yeah, we are noting it. We are noting down, and we are almost done. Just couple of questions, and then we'll take the questions from the chat box. Okay. So one thing that I wanted to ask, like if the person develop antibodies, so is it necessary for the same person, like when the vaccine come, is it necessary to take the vaccine for everyone, even if the person has developed antibodies? Dr. Shailendra.
This is
Oh my God. That is $1 million question. I think we've just put in $1 million grant with Australian Indian government to give us money to find that out. We don't know. And the answer, I mean, it is a good question, obviously, because, for example, those who got COVID-19 have recovered, should they be given the vaccine? Because they obviously are more at risk of, getting the vaccine, potentially side effects and long-term effects. So it's very difficult to say who to prioritize at this stage. There are some guidelines coming out now that 1, 2, and 3 people that we need to prioritize to get the vaccine. For someone who is infected, I think by the time the vaccine comes, we'll have more information. In COVID, 1 week is a long time. Every week you see so much new information comes in that by the time we will have a vaccine, which will be somewhere between 6 weeks to 6 months, hopefully, if they work, we'll hear some good news in next few weeks to months. If things work, so the problem we are going to have is that, are we going to do testing before giving the vaccine? Do we know reliably that somebody has antibodies, that they are protected from getting reinfection with COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 infection? So those questions are very difficult. As the time progresses, we might have some better answers.
Okay.
And that might tell us that if you have got COVID in the last 3 months, you are not at risk for at least for 3 more months, and then you can be later in the queue of getting. Those answers are not there at the moment. What we need to do is do few things, right? Those most at risk need to be protected in some way, shape, or form. Those most at risk of transmission, so that might be young people who go to work, who share
Okay.
public transport. They may be more at risk of getting infection and giving it to somebody at home. So your old grandparents may not be leaving the home, but the person who is traveling on the train or bus system, getting the infection from there and giving it to the parents. So we might decide, we're not going to giving vaccines to those people who are young because nothing happens to them by and large. But then it's counterproductive sometimes because they are the ones who might actually be the vehicle which spread infection from place to place. healthcare providers obviously are an important pillar of strength. So that they need to be vaccinated as soon as it is feasible and practical to do it. What everybody is doing at the moment is doing something they call modeling studies. When you introduced me, Rahul, about using game theory. So a number of colleagues that I work with have done using game theory, which is a sophisticated software to predict decision-making of people. What we don't even know, you saw a lot of anti-mask protests across a lot of countries. US probably is a prime example. What we don't know whether people will actually take the vaccine or when it comes. And I can give you an example of HPV vaccine in India. It was a problem. It's still not launched as the government provided vaccination. We know it works. So there are various other things. When the vaccine comes, will it have side effects? When the vaccine comes, how effective the vaccine will be. Whether people's perception of what the vaccine can do. So as you're rightly saying, if I've got COVID 2 months ago, will I think I'm at risk of getting this infection? And will I then not take the vaccine, even if I'm at risk of getting the reinfection? And so those are $1 million questions. Should we give it in the metros first? Or should we go to rural areas first? I mean, those are questions that we have to actually, and every country, every state will have to develop a matrix around saying, where is the maximum impact going to be in the first month of the launch of vaccine? Where is the maximum impact going to be in 3 months after the vaccines, 6 months after the vaccine? And then what we don't know again is whether the vaccine needs to be given every 3 months, every 6 months, or every year, as in case of influenza. Those are really, really interesting questions.
Yes.
I can't give you the answer. आता सांगू शकत नाही की वॅक्सिन आलं आणि जर इफेक्टिव्ह असलं तर सगळ्यांनी घेणं जरुरी आहे. जेव्हा तुमचा नंबर येईल तेव्हा I think there will be systems in place to prioritize those who are most at risk of getting it, those who provide care definitely, and those who potentially have had a chance of catching it through their work or through their transport or other things. So
Yes.
I don't know, Sitesh, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I would agree, Shailendra, and I think that the way I would look at it as an immunologist, like you rightly said, probably 6 months after an infection, up to 6 months after an infection, most coronaviruses, at least the past ones, have shown a decently good immunity. But I think by the time we get a vaccine, some of those people will be 6 months out. But the prioritization will need to be done in a different way. And I think they're looking at people who have high risk factors, who are elderly, who have morbid conditions, after obviously healthcare workers, you know, the security forces, the military forces, the people who are critical for the running of a system. After some of those, these priorities will have to be set by the government authorities and by organizations such as which with you are working to figure out those, you can say, matrices and those timelines and guidelines on what would work in each country and each situation. So I agree that there are many unanswered questions which will get answered in the next few months.
Probably we will need one more webinar to educate again people about the vaccine.
When the vaccine comes out, yes.
Yes, when the vaccine comes out. Because again, many WhatsApp messages will flow, people will search on net. So again, more webinar from one person we will need. I will tell occasions to conduct one more webinar. Okay, Dr. Sitesh, one more question I want to ask. Like nowadays people are not going out because of the fear, and instead of that they are taking the tablets like vitamin D and vitamin C. So how useful it is, those tablets, vitamins?
So I think taking vitamin tablets blindly is not a good idea, and vitamin D, especially because it is what is called a fat soluble vitamin.
Okay.
If a person takes too much of it, they can run into side effects. So if someone is taking a very reasonable dose, like 1,000 international units, 3,000 international units once a day, okay, that's considered an average replacement dosage, and they should be okay.
Okay.
But if they are taking the 60,000 unit capsule and they are taking it every week, and they take it for a prolonged period of time, then they can actually run into hypervitaminosis D.
Okay.
So that's something that people need to be aware about, and they need to take vitamin supplementation also with consultation of their physician. And if they are going to be on it for a long time, then they should actually have blood levels checked before they do blind replacement. That's the vitamin D. Now, getting vitamin C prevention of respiratory infections is really what we call a gray area. The data that is there, and we have certain things called Cochrane reviews in which we study dozens of publications together to see how valid is the recommendation. It has been found that just randomly taking vitamin C 1000 milligrams or 1500 milligrams for a person who otherwise doesn't have other risk factors is not a very beneficial thing. And see people taking 1000, 2000 milligrams every day, and they end up with gastritis, with stomach irritation, other problems. So I think if you're going to take these vitamins, take them in reasonable doses. I believe a 500 milligram or a 250 milligram of vitamin C won't hurt you, and it will give you a little bit of a boost. 1000 or 2000 international units of vitamin D will be a normal boost. Like I also see a lot of people taking zinc, and you need only 8 or 10 milligrams of zinc a day, and they are taking 50 to 100 milligrams a day. And if you take zinc for too long, it causes copper deficiency in your body. People don't do these things. And so I think that the replacement needs to be done in a very careful way, in a very sensitive way, and in a reasonable way, recognizing the person's diet, lifestyle, and all the other factors, rather than just randomly taking it because you heard it on some webinar that it's good for you to take it.
Yes. So better you always discuss with your physician. Okay, thank you, doctor. Just couple of questions, and then we will go to the questions that we got in the chat. So, Dr. Shailendra, I would like to ask you that now the many festivals are coming in India. So, is it advisable to do get-togethers with relatives indoor, or it's better to meet everybody outside?
I think Sitesh has probably answered some of the aspects of this question. If you can meet outside, which doesn't involve taking public transport. If you're talking about outside as in your backyard and sitting down there, it's better to be sitting there rather than 15 people in one room.
Okay.
Various situations and settings have put guidelines in place depending upon how large the COVID situation is. For example, in Australia, we went from no visitors to 2 visitors to 5 visitors to up to 10.
Yes.
I think houses it depends on how your house is.
Yes.
If you are able to safely accommodate X number of people, which is probably usually 5 in most situations, can. If it's your own family, there is no problem because you always meet all the time. It's about, and people do this shopping, and this is where the problem is, that you try to get one person, so then you develop this protocol, 2 o'clock you will come, 3 o'clock. That's not a good idea.
Actually.
Then what you're doing is probably acting as a chain of transmission. So that doesn't help. So don't try to game the system in a way that the advice is that if you're not able to, if you're not living together, and if you are definitely symptomatic, do not go.
Okay.
Do not visit anybody.
Okay.
If you have symptoms, no. If you are supposed to be self-quarantine, do not visit anybody. But obviously, it's so important to make sure that there is a human connection between you and your relatives, your parents, grandparents, and kids. And so that is there till the time you take real precautions. Not 50 people in your household. Do not throw those kind of parties at this. This is not a good idea to do it at this stage. I'm sure there are some local guidelines in place, but if you are able to meet outside safely, it's probably better because, as Sitesh has nicely explained, the risks are almost non-existent in the outside setting, unless you are coming very close as a group, and that probably is not a good idea. I've seen people coming and dancing in a small room area. I mean, that's the way you're going to spread it. And then one infection is enough to spread across the whole group. And then what you're going to do is visit each other after that. So each person will go and visit. That is also very, you're going to actually be the seed. As important it is to meet with reasonable precautions, I think common sense should prevail eventually, because we have to start learning life with COVID.
Yes, that's what actually.
That is the case. We cannot stop living life, but that doesn't mean you should go overboard and completely start, doing everything that we did in the past.
Yes, we can. Like, if possible, we should meet outdoor. Okay, thank you very much, Shailendra. And this is the last question from my list. Dr. Sitesh, I would like to ask how we can educate ourselves, our kids, and our parents about the coronavirus without getting anxious or panic. Because the numbers, as the we watch news and the numbers are coming in the newspaper, it really makes us panic. So, how to educate ourselves?
First thing you have to do is don't watch the news so much.
Okay.
Because to some extent, more than COVID-19, it's the media flu that is making people very sick and scared. So choose what you hear, choose your sources very carefully, where you get your information from. Go with only reliable people, not with everything that comes in your WhatsApp and comes on your Facebook. Not everything is tested and appropriate. And realize that the virus is not just going to come from, means I know people who are sanitizing their house 12 times in a day. I know people who are washing hands to the point of dashes on their hands.
Yeah.
Okay. So you cannot become obsessive compulsive. You can't do more than is required. You have to realize that there's a balance, because the amount of anxiety, the amount of fear that is there outside is irrational. And so, for example, I for my patients and for anyone else who's interested, I record these short videos. I've been doing it since March, which I put on my YouTube channel, which is Dr. Roy Health. And I keep giving people real information about how it spread. Where does this virus come from? Do you really need to worry about the cardboard box that is being delivered from Amazon?
Yes, exactly.
Or you don't need to worry about it. So I give all these practical tips. And my patients know that if they listen to me, they will get valid answers. They will not be scared. They will not be afraid. They will realize that there has always been, आपल्या आजूबाजूला ना always एक जीव सृष्टी होतं, एक invisible microbial world. कोविडच्या अगोदर आपण त्याबद्दल अजिबात काही विचार करत नव्हतो. बट त्यामुळे आपल्या कंट्रीमध्ये वर्ल्डचे हायेस्ट टीबीचे केसेस आहेत. कारण कुठेही थुकणं, कुठेही पान थुकणं, कुठेही स्पिट करणं, हे सगळं आपण आता कोविड नंतर खूप केअर घेणार आहोत. वी आर गोइंग टू वेअर मास्क, वी आर गोइंग टू कट डाऊन दीज थिंग्स. सो कोविड has come with a reason to teach us some lessons, in my opinion. We as a human race had become too egoistic that nothing can affect us and nothing can hurt us and nothing can bring us to our knees. And a virus which is invisible to the human eye brought the entire globe of 7.4 billion people to a grinding halt within days. So we need to wake up and we need to realize that these are things that we need to be careful about, but at the same time, you should come too scared, and you should, as long as you're doing your physical distancing, you're doing your hand washing, you're wearing your face mask, you can live a normal life. And with the right kind of precautions, you don't have anything to worry about.
Okay. So
Sitesh,
2020
just a note, Vaishali.
Yes.
Interesting, because Sitesh, what has happened in Australia is we've had actually less deaths this year compared to last year, even the aged care setting. We talk about people dying, but we actually have 1,000 less people dying this year up until this month than last year, because everybody has improved the way they kind of behave. People who visited were doing the infection control. People obviously working there definitely were doing it. And so what we're going to see is a very, very interesting time in future, and probably a much more aware population. Like we are doing these seminars. We feel like you should be doing this all the time, talking to communities and talking to groups to get together like this on the Zoom. I think it's amazing what COVID has taught us. So it actually brought the world together in some way. We're not physically meeting a lot of people, but it has brought this world together of doctors and providers and policymakers and governments and people. And that's really important contribution that this is probably done in the COVID pandemic.
2020 is a best teacher, we can say. So many things 2020 taught us. So any can Dr. Ritesh, sorry, Dr. Sitesh, I'm sorry. So what lessons have COVID-19 trying to teach us that we should not forget, actually?
So I think the first lesson is that no one had heard about immunity before. Nobody had cared about their immunity before, and now everyone is talking about herd immunity. So take care of yourself, your diet, your lifestyle, your exercise, your time spent with family and friends, your time spent in meditation. Okay, even doing yoga, pranayam, meditation, which keeps your mind calm, makes your immune system strong. So I think
Yes.
each person needs to start giving themselves time, which they were not doing before. So give yourself time. That's a big lesson. Second, don't take your life for granted. Okay, people have been taking their life for granted. This has made them aware that you can't take your life for granted, because we have unfortunately seen children, we've seen teenagers, we've seen young adults lose their life. And there
Yes.
have been many athletes around the world who are in very good physical shape, who are exercising, doing everything right, and they still caught the virus. So in all of this, we have to realize that we have to live a life of balance. And that life of balance through diet, lifestyle, meditation is something that if we incorporate into our life, we'll be happier, we'll be healthier, we'll be stronger, the world will be a more peaceful place. There'll be less violence, there'll be less fights, there'll be less wars. So I think in some ways, like Shailendra said, we can take this as an opportunity to come together, to be one. Okay.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
if we can do that, and we can learn to, as I said, respect the microbial world around us, take good care of ourselves, take good care of our health, get the right guidance from the right kind of physicians and doctors who are there to guide us in prevention. The most important message in all of this is prevention is better than cure.
Yes, yes,
And I
yes,
think that
definitely.
when the vaccine comes, that will also be an important message, that prevention is better than cure.
Yes. So now, thank you, Dr. Sitesh, Dr. Shailendra. Now I will take the chat box questions. One question is that rapid antigen comes negative. If rapid antigen test comes negative, according to ICMR, RT-PCR need to be done. So what are your views on this, Dr. Shailendra?
Well, I mean, if antigen tests are a problem test, so there's a challenge, obviously. So definitely RT-PCR needs to be done. If you have that, follow the protocols. So every country has their own protocols, and it's important to follow them for all means. And obviously, if ICMR has said that is what the protocol is, I think it's important to follow that. Having said that, it is antigen test to be you the only one. If it is negative, definitely RT-PCR, and as Sitesh said, even that. So if you are symptomatic, just take precautions right from there. I think the tests are there to guide us in that. But if you have symptoms, just be careful in a way. RT-PCR is one test which is kind of the gold standard at this stage that we have, and that should be the one that should be used eventually.
Okay, so RT-PCR
antigen tests have
to
a role to play, but their role is quite different to individual diagnosis.
Okay.
Sitesh, do you have any?
Hello.
I would agree with that, and I would say that because the antigen test also is user dependent on how the sample is taken, and the RT-PCR is also user dependent on how the sample is taken. I think if the suspicion and the concern and the clinical concern is high for the person, then if the antigen test is negative, then the RT-PCR should be done. That is the protocol, and it should be followed.
Hello, can I ask a question? Can I ask?
Yes.
Yes, usually see people are sending, the surgeons are sending rapid antigen test before surgery. So if that comes negative, you are again going to do the RT-PCR, and if it comes positive, you are not going to take the patient for OT. So what is the importance? What to do? I mean, you have to decide whether the patient has symptoms. If it is a rapid antigen comes negative and patient doesn't have any symptom, then you can go ahead with the surgery. What advice should I give to the clinician?
No, because surgery, unless it's an emergency surgery and there the decision is dependent on the situation, If there is time that is available for the surgery, then the protocol still is that if the antigen test is negative, then you should do the RT-PCR even if the person is asymptomatic, because we do know that there have been people who've been operated by the surgeons and 4 days later they have been detected to be all anesthetists, all the surgeons, the entire OT staff has gotten quarantined. So I think that in this situation, other than the high-risk surgeries which require rapid decision, rapid action, for most other procedures, going in, because again, antigen test, as we know, as with the RT-PCR, it's not a perfect test. Doing both will give you greater confidence than doing only one.
Okay.
But also, I
They
think
can
it's important
directly
that
ask
you,
for RT-PCR. Why to ask for rapid antigen?
I completely agree. They can directly go for an RT-PCR if it's for an elective surgery. That's the best thing to do.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And please make sure that if patients are not, if they're symptomatic, it's a very different argument altogether.
Exactly.
This is about people who don't have symptoms or don't have immediate contact with COVID patient in the last few days. So
Because
that is the case, then
if you
it
don't do
really still pass
RT-PCR
away.
and the patient comes positive after your surgery, then he might make a medical legal point of view also. It is very important. Later on, if RT-PCR is done after the surgery,
Correct.
and
He
if
could
he
say
comes
that you all
positive, then
infected. Yes, he could say that you all
yes,
infected
yes,
me.
yes, yes.
Sitesh, I have one question. There are people like
Yes.
antigen is negative, RT-PCR is
Hi,
negative.
Sachin.
If you have, hi, Sitesh. Nice to see you.
Yes, same here.
There are a lot of people like now RT-PCR is negative. Then I mean, okay, you are still suspicious and getting their HRCT. So if people are symptomatic, do a HRCT rather than doing antigen test, RT-PCR, which are very lot of high false positive, false negative rates are there.
I wish that the protocols would. I wish that the protocols would say that don't at this point of time. Your first test, if you have a symptomatic patient, is still going to be RT-PCR. Now, if your clinical suspicion is very high, the person is coughing, they are requiring oxygen, they are getting hospitalized, then you absolutely must be getting a HRCT at around the same time that you're doing your RT-PCR. You shouldn't even be waiting for the RT-PCR result while you're getting the CT scan done. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's.
And I do believe that in that situation, if you do that, the classic appearance that you get on the high resolution CT scan can guide your treatment and save you the 1 or 2 days before the report comes back of the RT.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, different, because there are people who are getting couple of RT-PCR negative, couple of antigen are negative. Probably they had crossed that bar, and then okay, they are already infected with showing some lung symptoms, where their CT is showing COVID pneumonia, like all those ground glass pictures.
There should be no delay. There should be no delay in doing the high resolution CT scan of the chest in a person who's requiring oxygen or experiencing breathlessness or any of these things, or even for that matter, having fever and cough for several days. Regardless of what the RT-PCR shows, that person needs a HRCT chest.
Okay.
Thanks.
Vaishali, can I suggest something? Let's do the questions that are on the chat, and then we'll allow people to ask questions directly. So we can hold on to your questions. We'll look at the chat and then we'll come back.
In fact, I request everyone, the audience, rather than asking direct question, if you can drop on chat box so we can have a still.
Yeah, I'm taking that. Yeah. One more questions is about the vaccine. So if the vaccine comes, will it be the survivor? Will it be savior? Sorry, will it be helpful?
Well, I mean, obviously, if the vaccine works, it will be very helpful. No question about it. I think concerns are our ability to give vaccine to 1.4 billion people in the country, in a way, those who need them, but across the world. So there are a variety of different steps. So if you get a chance, you could go to a website on Gavi. It tells you the process of manufacturing, distribution, prioritize, how to prioritize. It will be a savior, but there are questions still. Will it be a savior for 1 year like influenza? Do we have to give it every year? And so that's going to add a cost. Will it be an injectable vaccine which requires all the safe injecting practices across the board? That will be another really challenge. Will it be effective equally in older people and children and pregnant women? So again, like swine flu, whether pregnant is going to be a risk, but they haven't been COVID, but with the vaccine will be effective. So those questions. So even if the vaccine comes, the specific population groups will take. So people with cancer, should we give the vaccine to them, for example? People on immunosuppressive therapy, should we give vaccine to them? Those questions will take a little bit more time to be answered in a way. And so yes, vaccine will be a savior, but there will be 1, 2, 3 and steps before we can get to that stage, I think. The moment a vaccine is declared a success, I see a lot of people like, it's not going to suddenly change. As I showed to you, and I can show it to you again, 1796 when we had the vaccine for smallpox. Smallpox was eradicated from the world in 1977. It took almost 180 years after having the effective vaccine to eradicate it. Hepatitis B, we almost have a very effective vaccine. We still don't vaccinate enough people for hepatitis B. And so those are things that we need to learn from. So yes, it will be a savior, but you take it. Yes, it will be a savior if we all can afford it in a way. And yes, it will be a savior if it actually protects you from lifelong infections. There'll be few ifs and buts there. Sitesh?
I'll just like to add one thing, Vaishali. I don't mean this in a negative way or in a pessimistic way, but yeah, as an immunologist, I have never seen a vaccine being developed in anything less than 5 years. Okay. This is going to be the first time in human history that a vaccine is going to be developed in 7 or 8 months, if everything goes according to the timeline. So there are many unanswered questions about this vaccine that even the manufacturers themselves don't know what the long-term effects will be, how long the effect will last, how effective it will be. So yes, while I want to tell you that a vaccine will be a life savior, but for me to say that without having so much data is like shooting in the dark. So all I can say is let's hope and pray that the vaccine is safe, it's immunogenic, it is effective, and it is long lasting. We all need to pray for that before the vaccine comes.
Okay. So
I just want to say, Vaishali, that is the only way to get to herd immunity, not allowing people to get natural infections. So if people are thinking that we can get herd immunity and we don't need the vaccine, it doesn't work like that. We are not, because what we don't know is if we allow people to get infected, what are the long-term effects of COVID-19 itself?
Yes.
And so that is also not an option. So yes, obviously, if we get the vaccine, that will probably be one of the saviors in some way, but there'll be questions.
Till that time, I think our healthy lifestyle, precautions, masks are the savior for us. So one question is school related. So wherever school will be open, so do kids need to wear mask all the time when they will start school?
Should I take that?
Yes.
Yeah, you can take it. I can answer afterwards. You can take it out.
Yeah.
What's happening in India at the moment, but I can tell you what's happening here.
I think it's too early to open schools yet, in my opinion. Too early to even think or talk about it, because once schools reopen, it's very hard to control kids with all the things that they do.
Yes.
It's very, very difficult to manage them. Imagine telling a 6-year-old to wear a mask the whole day in class. Do you really think that's going to happen?
No.
It's not going to happen. And so I think till we have more definitive treatments, we have definitive plans in place, vaccines in place, or the numbers decline immensely of the cases in a certain country or a part of the world, I don't think that going with opening schools and getting kids back in school is really an answer. Not because, see, I'm a pediatrician myself and I also take care of adults. And I can tell you that kids are less likely to get very sick. Kids are less likely to get hospitalized, but it's not like their risk is zero. And we also know that kids can certainly transmit the infection to the adults, to the grandparents, to the people around them. And in that situation, it becomes a very, very risky proposition. So I think that at this point of time, trying to open schools and get kids back in them and put masks on them and try to get them taken care of, in that way seems a little too difficult to implement is the only way I would say it. It looks too difficult to implement. Shailendra, you can chime in.
Yeah, no, so absolutely. The difference is, I guess, as a country or as a state, it's very difficult to make a decision based on. So for some regions in the rural area, we stop because even if there is no COVID in that setting, and that is where the challenge is going to be. How do we actually grade our response appropriately? When do we reopen schools in certain areas? When do you reopen schools in the bigger cities? So I think one size fits all approach that we currently seem to have about schools, either yes or no. I don't think that's really going to be an option for us. Long term, we can't keep schools closed forever, for example. So we need to really look at the options, how we can reopen them. But the other factor is having a graded response at every setting. So we provide guidelines. If you have X number of cases in your setting, then you can go back to school with COVID safe environments. Now, yes, you're absolutely right. Kids are not going to be social distancing. That's very difficult for them to do. They're not going to be using masks all the time. Amazing things with our daughter at the moment. The moment I come back, she's saying, Dad, wash your hands first. She'll come back and wash her hands. So kids learn. Kids are very adaptable. They're much more clever than we think they are. They will learn very, very easily how to be COVID safe. It's the adults who probably don't learn that well. So yes, I agree that at this stage, I think a lot of cities in India are not ready to be reopening. In Sydney, we have the skills. So schools are open. So my children, both of them are going to schools. And there is obviously protocols in place, but they can't really social distance. The games don't happen. The assemblies don't happen. So get-togethers don't happen, but education goes on. Victoria is completely different. In Melbourne, because the COVID is a bigger problem, they are completely online. So nobody's going to school there. And so within a country, we have different approaches. And that is what we need to look at. You cannot just say that if Sholapur doesn't have a problem, should Sholapur be able to open the schools? By all means, they should be able to open the schools. If Aurangabad has a problem, maybe we can take a different response in Aurangabad. So that kind of matrix needs to be done as well. But it needs to be a response based on your COVID numbers, based on availability of precautions, vaccination when it's available.
Okay. I think I am done with the questions.
I can just see
Yes.
there's one or two questions.
Sorry, in chat
I
box.
think some
Yeah.
repeated, some questions you have already answered. Just see, Rahul, can you see
Yes,
the
yes.
questions?
So
Yeah.
there is some questions received on mail. So first is, can COVID patient donate a blood to a normal patient? If yes, then after how many days?
Mr. Bodhankar,
Haji.
this is Shantanu, who happens to be a friend of Dr. Shailendra. So I just have a question to pop.
Please, sir. Please go ahead.
So before you take any of the questions on email, I would like to ask Dr. Shailendra, where does he see India and the rest of the world 1 year from now?
That's a crystal ball question, Shantanu. I don't know answers. I mean, I've been trying to provide some answers by working with really very clever mathematicians. There's some amazing people working at the moment across the world who do this kind of forecasting, using modeling, using game theory. So this is what we're trying to do at the moment, is to work with different groups to look at where we're going to be. Like, optimism is always the way to go. So I hope that we have a vaccine in the next few months which will work. We're doing modeling at the moment to look at if vaccine is 40% effective, how will we go about it? If vaccine is 60% effective, how will we go about it in the population? And so 1 year from now, if you ask me, I worked in HIV for the last 3 decades. We still have HIV around. And so I think
But
there is no magic pill.
It is no longer as big a threat as it used to be perceived.
Absolutely. It took three decades for that. So let's have patience about COVID. I think we just need to learn to live with it for some time. As we get some of these magic pills that will come along, which will be treatments and vaccination. We're focusing on vaccine a lot. Might be antivirals, which might come along as well in the next few months to years. And that might change the way we think about COVID. So good question to ask. But as Sitesh and I have consistently said, we don't have all the answers yet.
I think there are a couple of...
Shantanu.
Yeah, no. There are a couple of scenarios. The first is we have a vaccine, and the second is we don't have a vaccine. So how do you see things panning out in these two scenarios a year from now?
Again, that will depend a lot on whether people can get reinfected and transmit infections or not. So those are questions that we don't have answers to at the moment, but we will have some more answers in 6 months to 1 year from now. So I'll be able to give you much better answer next year with or without vaccines.
Shantanu, after 1 year, Shailendra will come to India.
I hope, Mr. Deshpande, the questions are answered.
Yes, so Rahul, you want to ask the other questions on the chat first before we get or your email list?
Yeah, so there is one question about the blood donation, what someone asked on a mail about can COVID patient donate the blood to a normal patient? If yes, then after how many days?
So I'll take that question. If the person is beyond, they've recovered completely and all they had was a mild infection, then the general timeline that we look at is about 2 months after the infection. If a person has had a more severe course, then they may have to wait longer. Some people have been voted to donate even within 1 month of getting the infection, provided that their course was very, very mild and they were otherwise in excellent health prior to the infection. But I would say that for safety reasons, because there have been cases of delayed viral shedders and we still don't understand how the virus particles behave in the body, because they have been found in stools and other samples for up to 40 days after an infection, even with a person who doesn't have symptoms. And so hence I would say a safe bet would be 2 to 3 months after the infection, they should be okay to donate blood.
Okay, great. Thanks. Another question is, what could have possibly helped Beijing and other cities in China? Why it did not spread despite of many contacts with Wuhan?
Okay, let me take that one, Sitesh. So there, obviously, one is we don't know the full story yet as to what exactly happened in China. In a way, we have some numbers, and it suffices to say that things that worked everywhere else would work in China as well. So physical distancing, using masks, not allowing people to go out of the homes, and that's what probably happened in Wuhan in the first place, and then a large part of China. China is a very different setting, so the government there can do a lot of things that most other governments will not be able to do on their own citizens, and that's why I think you saw some successes there, but then again, we don't know the exact picture from China. A lot of countries have been able to do that. So for example, New Zealand did very successful prevention of COVID-19. And a large part of that was people either willingly, in cases of New Zealand, for example, or sometimes by using the government machinery in case of China to not allow people to integrate, mix, and to be then physically distancing by choice or by force. But also to be able to provide services at their home, because that is critical. One of the things which created problems for us in India was the migrant labor issue, where people travel from other place to other places, and saw what happened in Maharashtra, for example. It is that so important to make sure that people are not traveling out of these zones. Now the genie is out of the bottle, so to say. Infections has already spread to a number of settings in India. So 1, 2, 3, we know what works in COVID. We all know what works, whether China does it or any other country does it. Things that work are quarantining people who are in touch with patients with COVID, quarantining patients who have COVID, obviously. Other people doing physical distancing, using a mask, and not allowing people to gather together. Like Sitesh said, not having schools open, for example, if that setting is what it is. So those are things that work in public health, and they work in every setting if you follow them. The critical question is, do we have the ability to follow those instructions? And is there support for people? Because people obviously will have to live their life in some way, shape, or form. They have to eat. They have to earn their livelihood in some shape or form. In Australia, the government provided payments for people who didn't have a job or lost their job. So those are sorts of things that the government needs to do to care for their own people. And people have to obviously do their own part as well, to be able to be aware about what COVID is. Things like seminar like this will help definitely, to be able to then follow instructions as they are given by your authorities in your settings. And so those things are critically important, I think. Desh, do you have to add anything?
Perfectly explained.
So,
Now there is a
I think
question
it's
received on mail. One more. Yeah.
No, I think it's clear what Shailendra has said, and I
Perfect.
believe that the strictness of the enforcement that was done in China and the strictness with which everything was done following the outbreak is the reason why we didn't hear much more from there.
Absolutely.
And besides that, we will never know the full story because it's not an open access place to know what happened later.
Absolutely.
Got that. That's also one of the aspects. Finally, the last, I think it's the last question is, when vaccine we can expect? Question received on mail.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I know people that I was speaking to my parents who are also here listening to me. And my mom said to me, you know, we're going to get a vaccine in 6 weeks. I said, well, great that you know it. I don't know we're going to get a vaccine in 6 weeks. I've got no idea whether we're going to get a vaccine in 6 weeks. But hope is an amazing thing. Hope is an amazing thing. So we all need to hope that it will come.
Baba Ramdev got a vaccine 6 months back, sir.
Actually, one of the uncle from our society, he said कि एक ज्योतिषवाणी आली आहे म्हणजे 16 सप्टेंबरला होऊन जाणार आहे सगळं. So particularly seniors are very hopeful and very optimistic.
Actually, if for people who believe in astrology, from the second half of September onwards, things are expected to get better. One thing that I would say, it also depends on how much of Trump's election and his election campaign, you know, whether it happens before November or it happens after November. There are many different factors that will go into deciding when the vaccine comes out.
Okay.
I'm just saying it as a lighter joke.
Yeah, of course.
But it's really dependent on the data. We have to wait for the data from the phase 3 trials. When the phase 3 trials data are in and we know the safety, efficacy, immunogenicity, which I think that the earliest phase 3 trials that are getting over were getting over at the end of August and in the end of September.
Yeah.
So I can't see how before October or November, because it takes time to crunch data from 30,000 people. Okay, you can't just crunch that data in 1 day or 2 days. So I can't see how before end of October, November, anything could happen at this point of time.
But Sitesh, on top of that, what we are writing at the moment is a position paper on saying that it doesn't matter how effective the vaccine is. The critical thing what is going to decide the success against COVID is the uptake and people making decisions to take the vaccine. It absolutely doesn't matter even if the vaccine is 60% effective. It's going to depend on people who will actually then go and take it, and the governments and the policies and distribution channels, their ability to actually deliver the vaccine in time to people. And that is what will decide the success of the vaccine, not just the efficacy of vaccine, because there are too many other parameters in play here.
Okay.
Yeah, this question was straightway related with our industry as well, because events have got stuck up. So we are also looking forward to the question again.
One more question which I find very useful. Like, is there any particular mask that an asthmatic patient should wear?
Oh yeah.
As a super specialist in asthma, I can tell you that there are no specific guidelines at this point of time that an asthmatic should wear a particular type of mask. The most commonly available and probably the most economical masks are the surgical 3-ply masks, but they need to be replaced on a regular basis when they are used. The other option is an N95 mask. I need a charger. I don't have a charger. I'm out for this. Yeah. And for the N95 mask, again, it's primarily was meant for healthcare professionals. It was not meant for general public use, even in the past, though in India, we see a lot of people walking around with N95 masks. Yeah. So I would say a surgical 3-ply mask or a good quality cloth mask that is at least 2-layer or 3-layer should be adequate. It does not matter whether the person is asthmatic or not, because there is no data right now to say that asthmatic people catch COVID-19 more than other people. There is no such data right now.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I think I'm done with from my side with questions. And thank you, Shailendra. Thank you, Dr. Sitesh, for your precious time. And it was indeed very informative webinar, particularly खूप म्हणजे गैरसमज दूर झाले आणि कळालं की हाऊ टू लिव्ह विथ कोविड बिकॉज दॅट इज very important now. Now we understand that COVID is not going to go anywhere, so we have to live with it. How to live with it, you two very well explained, and thanks for your precious time. Now over to Rahul.
Madam, this is Shantanu. The next time you need to adjust your camera. Your face is not visible
Okay,
clearly.
my voice is visible. That is more than enough.
Yeah.
Okay, now two
Anyhow,
things are,
I think
I'll take 5 minutes of times.
no, thank
Rahul,
you.
just
Thank you.
I may be,
Thank you,
I may be
Bodhankar sahib, for arranging a very informative seminar, boss.
Thank you.
Uh,
Rahul, I might be running out of battery
Very
charge.
nice.
If I suddenly disappear, please don't think that I'm being rude. It's just that my battery is running out.
So absolutely, thank you very
Your
much.
background looks very beautiful and green though.
Thank you.
So, Dr.
I
Roy,
had to
now
come here suddenly and urgently.
we normally conclude
Is
our
it Bombay? Is it Bombay?
No. I'm outside Mumbai right now.
Yeah, that's why.
Okay, normally we conclude webinar with the Tejas music. He's going to play today is the Teachers Day, so everyone is happy Teachers Day to all doctors who are teaching us on this webinar. And Tejas, are you ready? So he's going to play one small music.
Wow, Tejas.
क्या बात है.
After that, we will have a small vote of thanks, and then we will conclude the webinar. And I'll send this live channel link at the same time on Dr. Roy's YouTube, so that all can view the same. Tejas, are you ready?
Very enthusiastic child.
Wonderful. Great way to boost your immunity, music.
Yes.
पहिले मी काय बोलना चाहतो तुम्हाला सगळ्या टीचर्स I wish happy Teachers Day to all the teachers because they are doing a lot of hard work. They're taking much efforts and learning new technologies in this COVID-19 with the new normal via the online classes. I'm going to play my school prayer.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much, Tejas. Now I am handing over mic to Sharvari Bodhankar, my better half, the partner in the business as well, to express a vote of thanks. Hey.
Thank you so much, Rahul. It was amazing. Hello, am I audible here?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you so much. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a thanks of vote for all these webinars. And we from Bodhankar Events and with Bodhankar Consultancy Services, it's our pleasure to appreciate you, Dr. Shailendra Savleshwarkar from Sydney and Dr. Sitesh Roy from Mumbai. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your valuable time with us on this webinar, for all the questions which were all unanswered in our mind. And yes, this webinar will be the very much helpful for all and eye opener for all the viewers here. And thank you so much to share your findings with perfect scientific logic, with all do's and don'ts, with most preferred options, with respect to taking care in this particular situation. Adding to this, I would appreciate Vaishali Bakshi to hold this seminar in a wonderful way. Thank you so much, Tejas, also for playing such a beautiful piece on piano. And last but not the least, our participants on the webinar and viewers on Facebook and all other social medias. Thank you once again. Over from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vaishali. Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roy. Thank you, Dr. Shailen.
Thank you, Sitesh.
Pushpaka.